They say some bodies rot in days, others survive centuries in silence. But there is only one whose silence bleeds. In the year 1625, deep within the shadows of what was once the Florentine Republic, there lived a man whose name the church dared not speak, and whose writings were sealed behind wax and dread. His name was Aurelio Ferran, a name that once echoed in the great marble halls of cathedrals as a miracle, then faded into whispers as heresy. He was not born of nobility, nor bred from scholars, but from filth and famine, a gutter child raised by silence, shadows, and the sound of bells. Yet by the age of 20, Aurelio spoke in tongues, not the tongues of angels, but of things not yet born. In taverns and alleyways, he murmured predictions that came true with cruel precision. A noble woman miscarried beneath a blood moon, just as he said. A plague ship docked in Genoa days before the harbor even smelled of salt. And when asked how he knew, he answered with a chilling calm, "I dream in reverse." By 1630, rumors of the Prophet of Florence reached Rome. The Vatican dispatched inquisitors under the guise of healers. They found Aurelio not in opulence, but kneeling in the catacombs beneath the ruined chapel of St. Verena, sketching lines in blood across the stone floor. The patterns were not random. Later scholars would recognize them as primitive anatomical diagrams of the human brain, centuries ahead of their time. The church feared him, but not enough to burn him. Instead, they locked him away in the Abbey of San Meridio, a forgotten stone monolith perched atop a cliff in Tuscany where screams were swallowed by the wind. There, he lived under guard, his visions recorded, then buried. His body, the records claimed, gave out in 1644. But this was where the story refuses to die. When Aurelio Ferran died, the monks prepared his body for burial. But the skin did not grow pale, the veins did not dry, the nails did not loosen. In fact, his flesh retained a lukewarm hue, as though he had simply drifted into slumber. Still, they entombed him, behind a wall of black marble, beneath a sigil none of the surviving monks could ever decipher. And then the bleeding began. Each year on the eve of his death, the stone beneath the tomb turned red. Not metaphorical red, but blood real. Thick, dark blood seeped from the cracks in the marble, hooked pooling into rivulets that etched patterns across the chapel floor. The blood was tested, centuries later, and found to match that of a living man. But there were no wounds, no decay, no explanation. The church hushed it, declared it condensatio mirabilis, a miraculous condensation of humidity and old pigment. Yet monks fled the abbey in silence, faces pale as wax. One record found hidden in the binding of a burnt psalter read only, "He still dreams." The stone pulses when no one watches. By the 18th century, the abbey was abandoned. War broke out across Europe. Empires rose and bled. Yet the tomb remained untouched even by time. In 1814, a French physician named Etienne Louvet visited the ruins during Napoleon's final campaign. Obsessed with the writings of pre-modern mystics, Louvet sought proof of life after death. He found more than he asked for. The physician's journal survived, though he did not. In it, he wrote, "The tomb bears no dust. I touched the marble. It was warm. Not just warm, but rhythmic, as if it breathed beneath the stone. At precisely midnight, the marble groaned. Blood wept from its seams. And in my ear a whisper, 'They will come, and they will forget.'" Louvet's corpse was found at the foot of the tomb 3 days later, its eyes blackened, his tongue missing. Its journal was hidden by his assistant and smuggled to Paris, where it vanished into the archives of the Institut Catholic. This is not myth. This is recorded and redacted and sealed. But some seals are not made of wax, and some truths do not die. Aurelio Ferran was never canonized, never declared a saint, nor excommunicated. He rests in a strange limbo, not alive, not dead, and not yet finished, because the blood still flows. Even now, each year, on March 13th, the stone bleeds anew. And deep beneath the chapel ruins, under a vaulted crypt choked with ivy and thyme, someone still dreams in reverse. In 1921, amid the ruins of Europe gasping after the Great War, a German archivist named Martha Eisenwald uncovered a sealed crate buried beneath a crumbling Benedictine monastery in Carinthia. Inside it, a single, soot-darkened volume, bound in flesh-like leather. unmarked, but for a single phrase carved into the spine, Chronicon Inversus. She did not understand Latin. But as she touched the cover, a name pressed itself into her thoughts like a hot brand. Aurelio Ferran. What followed was no academic pursuit. Arta's notes later published posthumously, and immediately confiscated by the Vatican describe. Dreams more vivid than waking life. In them, she wandered long stone corridors lit by candlelight, heard whispers in extinct tongues, saw a man with lidless eyes stitching human hearts into books. Every morning, she awoke with blood on her fingertips, not hers. Driven by something she could not name, Marta left Berlin in winter, crossed into northern Italy under false papers, and arrived at the forgotten cliff, where the Abbey of San Meridio once stood. The church above was long gone, reduced to wind-scoured stones, but the crypt remained, intact. Waiting, she entered alone. The caretaker's journal retrieved from a village 20 miles away records her arrival with a single sentence. The German woman said she had been summoned, but no voice spoke. Marta descended the spiral staircase with only a lantern, her breath freezing in the gloom. The tomb, she wrote, was not silent. From behind the black marble, she heard slow, wet breathing, like lungs submerged in syrup. Her hand, against her will, touched the stone. Then heat, a pulse, like the throbbing behind a bruised eye. And then her eyes rolled back. What she saw, what she remembered afterward, would never leave her. A boy, no older than 10, wandering alone through plague-ridden Florence, untouched by death but burdened by visions. A hidden room beneath a chapel, where a circle of hooded men burned maps of the stars and stitched living rats into tapestries. A scroll inked in reverse that bled when read aloud. And finally, a mirror. One that showed not her reflection, but her own face aging in reverse, until it was no longer hers. She fled, screaming. Her hands burned, fingertips blackened. The tomb had not bled that year, but she had. Marta Eisenwald was committed to the hospital for the mentally ill 3 weeks later. She spoke only in riddles and wrote in a dialect that linguists have never traced. Before her death, she scratched one final message into her cell wall with her teeth. He is not a prophet. He is a wound the future cannot close. The church, desperate to contain the myth, quietly sealed the crypt again. Layers of concrete, then steel, then sacred soil brought from the Holy Land. But the blood did not care. Every March 13th, even through concrete, it found a way out. It emerged from the cracks in the walls. It hissed from the ground like steam. It ruined the floor of every structure ever built over the tomb. A chapel erected in 1953 collapsed within 2 years. No engineer could explain the fissures that formed, always in the shape of a circle, always centered on the stone coffin below. Then came the Vatican expedition of 1971. Headed by a Jesuit scholar-turned-anthropologist, Father Domenico Valli, the team sought to excavate and catalog the remnants of the abbey. But according to the only surviving member of that group, a mute man who never returned to the priesthood, what they unearthed was not architecture, but something closer to anatomy. The walls of the catacombs, once plain stone, were now lined with fibrous veins, pulsing faintly, as if the crypt itself had become a living organism. Beneath the tomb, they found an ossuary containing not bones, but teeth. Thousands of human teeth. None matching, none old. Father Valli's final recorded words were transmitted over shortwave radio, intercepted by a weather station near Genoa. It's not death, it's becoming. He is building something in silence. In sleep, and then static. No bodies were recovered. Only the mute survivor, found wandering the vineyards barefoot, covered in ash, weeping blood. Since then, no one has officially entered the crypt, but unofficially many have tried. Cultists, thrill-seekers, historians, none return. Or if they do, they are changed. One man, a Swiss photojournalist named Jost, entered in 1998 with a team of 3. He emerged 27 hours later, alone, naked, and blind. He carried no camera, but what he carried in his mind was worse. He painted obsessively, for the remaining 8 months of his life, hundreds of canvases, all identical. A man neither dead nor alive, with his chest opened like a book, bleeding clock gears from his ribs, and behind him, always, a wall of black marble that weeps. What happened to Aurelio Ferran's soul, if such a thing can even be spoken of, remains unknown. But what is clear, what every record whispers beneath its breath, is this: he saw too far, and the future saw him back. In the year 2003, a team of forensic anthropologists from the University of Milan received an unmarked parcel. No return address. Inside, wrapped in layers of cloth that smelled of myrrh and iron, was a single fragment of black marble porous. Veined with crimson and slick with what appeared to be fresh blood, the sample was tested, photographed, and archived under the code name AF03R. Though no one admitted to knowing what the initials meant, the blood, analyzed under electron microscopy, was ... impossible. Red blood cells were intact. The hemoglobin levels were above average, but the DNA, if one could call it, that showed genetic markers found in both ancient Mediterranean populations and unknown non-human sequences never recorded in any biological database. The lab's head technician, Dr. Lucia Benedetti, noted in her journal that after running tests, her hands smelled like copper for weeks. Her dreams, once ordinary, became plagued by visions of children buried beneath cathedral floors, chanting numbers backward. On March 13th of that year, she took her own life, written on her wall in her own blood. The tomb is not closed, is only paused. By then, whispers of the bleeding corpse beneath San Meridio had escaped into the digital ether. Forums sprang up, filled with cryptic coordinates, broken Latin, grainy satellite images showing a circular burn mark on the Earth, one that reappeared every year on the same night, only to vanish at dawn. But most disturbing of all was a video. Posted anonymously on March 14, 2007. It was only 12 seconds long. No sound, just a dim stone corridor lit by a flickering candle. The camera turned shaky, terrified, and for a single frame, one could see it. A man lying on a slab, not decayed, not breathing, his eyes open, bleeding slowly from the tear ducts. The video was taken down in less than an hour. Every repost scrubbed, the account deleted. But copies survived, buried in hard drives, whispered through chat rooms like relics of a forgotten gospel. And across the world, those who watched it began to share the same dream. A tower made of books screaming in Latin, a child walking backwards into a fire. A voice not heard but felt. His blood remembers every future we refused. By 2012, a group of rogue theologians calling themselves Custodes Inversi claimed that Aurelio Ferran had not simply been a prophet, but a reverse anchor, a soul tethered not to the past, but to all the futures that never came to be. That his mind had become a prison for aborted timelines, and his body a wound through which those timelines bled back into ours. They believed the blood was not a miracle, it was a message. One member of the group, Father Thomas Ruel, claimed in a recorded interview that during a trance-like prayer near the tomb, saw a vision of a distant future. Cities grown from bone, people with glass for skin, and time itself coiled like a serpent eating its own mouth. He wept for 7 hours. His final words before vanishing were, "He is the bruise on God's eye." None of this made the news. Of course it didn't. The Vatican has, since 2015, officially listed San Meridio as a non-place, a geographic anomaly. Erased from registries, GPS satellites rerouted around it. Travelers who attempt to find it are met with curiously consistent misfortunes. Flat tires, lost roads, time skips. One hiker claimed to walk for 6 hours toward the abbey only to end up back where he began. With his watch reversed by 4 minutes and a nosebleed, he could not stop. But the blood still flows. It stains the roots of trees that have never flowered, seeps from rock no rain has touched. One botanist collected moss samples from a grove half a mile from the site and found human blood type, AB negative, within the chlorophyll. So we ask again, what lies beneath the marble? Not a corpse, not a prophet, perhaps not even a man. Some believe Aurelio Ferran was not given his visions by God but by something older, something watching from the cracks between time. That when he dreamed in reverse, he did not see the future as we know it, but rather the errors in it, the flaws in the pattern of our unfolding reality, and that the bleeding is not decay, it is correction. One drop of blood each year to stitch close the tear between what is and what should have never been. But if that is true, What happens if the tomb stops bleeding? In the early hours of March 13, 2024, the blood did not come. The ground above the tomb remained dry, the air still. No groan of stone, no pulse beneath the marble. And for the first time in 4 centuries, the wound did not bleed. At first there was silence. Then came the disappearances. Within 48 hours, satellite imagery of the region vanished not, blacked out. Not censored but erased, replaced by terrain that did not match any known topography. The cliffside, where the abbey once stood, became a crater, not blasted but folded inward, as if the earth itself had yawned and swallowed memory. Then the dreams returned. All over the world, quietly, subtly in patterns, no news outlet dared. Link people began to report identical nightmares, with no corners, a voice made of insects. A man sewn shut at the mouth, tearing out his own ribs to spell messages no one could read. But in Geneva, a woman leapt from her balcony after carving a spiral into her own chest, screaming a single name before she fell: Aurelio. In Kyoto, a monk who had never heard of San Meridio stood up during silent meditation and began speaking fluent Tuscan dialect from the 1600s, reciting word-for-word passages from Aurelio's lost journals. When asked how, he replied, "He is no longer dreaming. We are." Across the internet, something else stirred. A file began appearing on disconnected servers titled Last Testament. Its code was malformed, undecipherable by AI or human programmers. But when opened, it played a sound. 13 seconds of pure, low-frequency resonance, almost inaudible. Yet those who listened reported nosebleeds, vertigo, and in some cases, temporary blindness. One woman claimed she saw a city made of mirrors collapsing inward. Another, a historian, said she saw a version of Florence that had never been rebuilt, still aflame with plague carts and screaming bells. A world forgotten by time, or spared by it. So what did it mean that the blood had stopped, that the correction had ended, or that the rift had finally healed? No, it meant the opposite. Because when a wound stops bleeding, it does not mean it is healed. It means it is closing, trapping whatever lies inside. And what lay inside Aurelio Ferran was not prophecy. It was a recording, a living archive of discarded fates, broken timelines, silenced futures. The body had been the vessel, the blood the echo, and now that the tomb had sealed, the archive is loose. In April 2024, 4 children in separate continents painted the exact same image during school art class. A marble coffin cracked open, something climbing, out made of shadow, bone, and symbols that shift when looked at directly. In June, all 4 children disappeared. No trace. Today, no official records remain of the Abbey of San Meridio. Vatican archivists deny any such place ever existed. When pressed, they smile, politely, and change the subject. But if you go to the far cliffs of northern Tuscany, you find the stone path swallowed by roots, and you walk it under the moonlight, you may still hear the soft hum beneath the soil. Not breathing, not dreaming, just waiting. And sometimes, only sometimes, if you place your ear to the ground, you may hear a voice not in words, but in pressure, pulsing beneath your skull like a forgotten memory returning home. It will not speak, it will not scream, it will simply bleed. Because the prophet is no longer dreaming in reverse. Now we are the ones who sleep backward. When the blood returns, it won't be from a tomb. It will be from us.